Greetings and welcome. Welcome to the Lev Project. This is book project number 3. I know it's been a long time since you have seen my face. I've been out of video mode. Oh, for those who just joined us, my name is Emuna Yisrael. This is the Lev Project portion of Take Time to Heal. Since the beginning of the year, January 1, we have been going over the narratives. So far, we have read Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. That was our last reading. If you didn't catch it, just jump on back in this channel and you will see it. And the time before that, we read 50 Years in Chains. And so I'm on earlier than usual today because I have something, another engagement later on. So I missed you guys for like the last 3 days since we finished on Thursday. I'm like, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing something, but I definitely missed you guys so much. So I had to, put on my little head wrap and greet everybody before we actually started reading. So for those who just joined us, hello, shalom. I had to come on camera. Every so often I go out of camera mode and I just don't want to be on camera. So right about now, I'm joining you guys and we're going to go ahead and read it. We have a special treat today. The last 2 narratives we read, it was about one from a masculine, I did it on purpose, one from a feminine perspective about their experience. This was their personal autobiographies of their experience. One was Charles Ball, the other one was Harriet Jacobs. Well, today, this is a special treat. If you haven't already seen, we're going to read the narrative of a ship surgeon, a European, because we're all looking at the narratives as it relates to slavery. So his name is Alexander Falconbridge. I have to keep remembering that, Alexander Falconbridge. And you can find what is this here? You can find the link. I left it in the box. And so this one is going to be a little difficult. I see it's not that long, but it is in this old English kind of language. They changed the S's don't look like S's. And so if you see me stuttering, I'm not going backwards. It's because the S's, if you look at the link that I put there, I noticed it must have been a tactic of their old English. The S's kind of look a little bit like a F. And who knew that so many S's were in words until you actually started reading it? So that's my disclaimer before we get started. The link is in the box, so you can definitely follow along. For those who've just joined us, feel free to share this. This is the 3rd installment or the 3rd edition of Take Time to Heal, the Lev Project. So today, again, without further ado, this is the account of the slave trade on the coast of Africa. I promise you, hold on to your scarves, your kippas, and your hats, because this is some interesting stuff. It was originally done by Alexander Falconbridge. He was a late surgeon, so he was on the ship. If you ever seen some of them slave movies, he's actually on the ship when the people are sick and he's prescribing all that stuff. So he would have seen up close and personal some stuff that was going on. It was originally printed out of London. And as always, I like to read the preface, right? So I'm going to go ahead and read the preface for this book and then we'll get started. Okay, now remember what I warned you about these S's, so stick with us. It says, the following sheets are intended to lay before the public the present state of a branch, of the British commerce, which ever since its existence has been held into detestation by all good men, but at this time more particularly engages the attention of the nation and is become the object of general reprobation. So this is the time where abolition is starting to kick up now, and he's gonna be even though he participated, he's redeemed. So even though he participated in the slave trade, he trying to get some cool points by now speaking out with what he knows. Leaving to ambler pens to expiate more at large on the injustice and inhumanity of the slave trade, I shall content myself with giving some account of the hardships which the unhappy objects of it undergo, meaning the slaves, and their cruelties they suffer from the period of their being reduced to a state of slavery, to their being disposed of in the West Indian Islands, where I fear their grievances find little alleviation. At the same time, I shall treat of a subject which appears not to have been attended to in the manner its importance requires. So he's about to blow open some, you know, they really wordy back in the day. So he about to drop a bomb. He about to give you some insider information about what's really going down. Where did I go? Sorry, I skipped down a little too far here. Was in the islands. He says, at the same time, okay, he says that already. No, at the same time, I shall treat of a subject which appears not to have been attended to in the manner its importance requires. That is the sufferings and loss of seamen employed in this trade, which from the intemperance of the climate and the inconsistencies they labor under during the voyage and the severity of most of the commanders occasion the destruction of great numbers annually. So he's like, oh, I'm not only going to tell you about the horrors that the quote unquote black people endured, but also the sailors who were on this ship. And this I shall endeavor to do by the recital of a number of facts which have fallen under my own immediate observation. So this is eyewitness news right here. All the knowledge of which I have attained from persons on whose veracity I can depend. And happy shall I esteem myself if an experience obtained by a series of inquiries and observations made during several voyages to the coast, meaning the coast of Africa, shall enable me to render any service to a cause which is become the cause of every person of humanity. Hold on, let me make this thing bigger here so that I can see. That's better. Yeah, that's better for me. Okay, he says, before I proceed to the methods of obtaining the slaves and their subsequent treatment, the treatment of sailors, and a concise account of the places on the coast of Africa where slaves were obtained, which I purpose to annex, it may not be unnecessary to give a short sketch of the usual proceedings of ships employed in the slave trade. All right, so that's the preface. He told us what he about to go do. He about to tell us about the ships. He's about to tell us about the sailors' condition. He's about to tell us about the slaves' condition. And he's about to tell us about the trade. Very interesting. If you have any questions, oh, hold on one second. If you have any questions, just leave them. Just leave them up. Let me go ahead and pull up this thing so I can see where you're leaving them, right? Before we get started here. This is about to be juicy, everybody. So please just stick with me. It's so juicy, you know, I had to come on live today. Let me see here. Okay, just in case you have any questions or comments. Doo-doo. 1 minute. Let's make sure there's not too many stuff here. Okay, I don't see it coming out. Let me get started here. Quick. All right, there it goes now. All right, there we go. All right, that should be good now. Contact Dr. Boyce Watkins so that your message can be heard. Okay, somebody said contact. Yeah, I usually send videos to Dr. Boyce. I have a few videos on his channel. I know I haven't done one in about 2 weeks, so definitely I have one that's due coming. Thank you, Little Brave Dave. I have one that's due coming to Dr. Boyce. I said I was going to do it today, but today is kind of filled up for me, so definitely most I will. This week, I'm going to drop another video and send it on over. He's always been very grateful in sharing the message. So thank you for that. Okay, we're going to start. Proceedings during the voyage. On the arrival of the ships at Bonny and New Calabar, by the way, that's I looked it up. That's around like Nigeria. Bonny, that was the name of the kingdom, Bonny. And New Calabar, it is customary for them to unbend the sails, strike the yards and topmats, and begin to build what they denominate a house. Sorry, I'll tell you about this old English. This is effected in the following manner. The sailors first lash the booms and yards from mast to mast in order to form a ridgepole about 10 feet above the deck. Several spars equal in length to the ridgepole are next lashed to the standing. He's about to go in. This is going to be a little monotonous, but let's stick to it. Ridging and form a well plate. Across the ridgepole and wall plate, several other spars or rafters are afterwards laid and lashed at the distance of about 6 inches from each other. On these other rasters or spars are laid lengthwise equal in extent to the ridgepole so as to form a kind of lattice. So he's going into how they set up shop when they're waiting on the slaves. Lattice or network with intricacies of 6 inches square. The roof is then converted with mats made of rushes of very loose texture, fastened together with rope yarn and so placed as to lap over each other like tiles. The space between the deck and the wall plate is likewise enclosed with a kind of lattice or network formed on sticks lashed across each other and leaving vacancies of about 4 inches square. Near the main mast, a partition is constructed of inch deal boards which reach athwart the ship. This division is called a barricado. It is about 8 feet in height and made to project near 2 feet over the sides of the ship. In this barricado, there is a door at which a sentinel is placed during the time the Negroes are permitted to come upon deck. It serves to keep the different sexes apart. And as there are small holes in it where blunder buffs, I'm reading really slow here, where we are fixed, sorry. Where did my line go? Hold on 1 second. Oh, here it is. Are fixed. And sometimes a cannon. It is found very convenient for quelling the insurrections that now and then happen. Another door is made in the lattice or network at the ladder by which you enter the ship. This door is guarded by a sentinel during the day and is locked at night, and I'm supposing the sentinel is a guard. At the head of the ship, there is a third floor for the use of the sailors, which is secured in the same manner as that at the gangway. There is also in the roof a large trap door through which the goods intended for barter, the water casks, etc., are hoisted in and out. The design of this house is to secure those on board from the heat of the sun, which in this latitude is intense, and from the wind and rain, which are particular seasons, are likewise extremely violent. It answers these purposes, however, but very effectually. The flight texture or the slight texture of the mats, I warned y'all about the F's that they keep making look like, the S's that look like F's, so please forgive me. The slight texture of the mats admits both the wind and the rain whenever it happens. Pens to be violent throughout the same time. It caresses the heat of the ship to very pernicious degree, especially between decks. So it gets really hot and the elements Basically, he's saying he's going through all of this to tell you about why they're doing this, to protect you from the elements. The increased warmth occasioned by this, together with the smoke produced from green mangrove, the usual firewood, which for want of current of air to carry it off, collects itself in large quantities and infects every part of the ship, render a vessel during its stay here very unhealthy. So they're getting smoked out by their firewood because there's not proper ventilation in there. He says the smoke also by its acrimonious quality often produces inflammations in the eyes, which terminates sometime in the loss of sight. Wow. Another purpose for which these temporary houses are erected is in order to prevent the purchased Negroes from leaping overboard. This, the horrors of their situation frequently impel them to attempt committed suicide, throwing yourself. We see that often in the movies. And they now and then effect it, notwithstanding all the precautions that are taken, by forcing their way through the lattice work. So they built this to try to get you, our foreparents, not to jump off this ship so that they can get money for their stolen cargo. The slave ships generally lie near a mile below the town in Bonny River, in 7 or 8 Phantom water, or phantom water, I think that's properly an F. Sometimes 15 sail English and French. Okay, let me rewind. Sometimes 15 sail English and French, but chiefly the former, meet here together. Soon after they cast anchor, the captains go on shore to make known their arrival and to inquire into the state of the trade. So everybody's parked up in the port, so to say. You know what I'm saying? Not just the English, not just the French. Different people are there at the same time, representing different countries to come get slaves. They likewise invite the king of Bonny to come on board, to whom previous to breaking bulk, they usually make presents in the country term dashes, D-A-S-H-E-S, dashes. I'm going to look that term up. So he's saying that this king of Bonny, you could look up the king of Bonny, they would have to give this dude presents, which generally consist of pieces of cloth, cotton, chinks, silk handkerchiefs, and other India goods, and formed sometimes of brandy, wine, or beer. So it's like you're paying homage to this king before you even go into trade. This is not the cost of what is causing you to get the slaves. This is for you to woo him, so to say. I thought that was very interesting. I'll tell you later why. But when I was at Bonny a few years ago, it was the residence of 2 kings whose name were Norfolk and Pepple. And we can look this stuff up. The houses of these princes were not distinguished from the cottages or huts of which the town consists in any other manner than they being of somewhat larger dimensions and surrounded with warehouses containing European goods designed for the purchase of slaves. He's going to read on. These slaves, which the kings procure in the same manner as the black traders do theirs, are found by them to the ships, or sold by them to the ships. And for every Negro sold there by the traders, the kings receive a duty or tax, which amounts to a considerable sum in the course of a year. This duty is collected by officers stationed on board the ships, who are termed officer boys, a denomination which it is thought they received from the English. I'm going really slow over this point because sometimes when we hear this narrative, oftentimes people try to paint it. And I recently read it, and I'm not delusional. I recently read an article where Africa, some people in Ghana was trying to say they are owed reparations for the slave trade. But this and other things let you know that they were complicit. Not only were they complicit, they got paid already. You understand? You got tribute. You had to be. The Europeans didn't just jump on land and was like, hey, I'm here, give me your slaves. No, it was very systematic. But let me not put any more Muna in it. Let's continue. It says the kings of Bani are absolute, though elective. They are they are assisted in the government by a small number of persons of a certain rank who style themselves as parliament gentlemen, an office which they generally hold for life. Every ship on its arrival is expected to send a present to these gentlemen. So not only the king, but the parliament gentlemen. If you watch Nigerian movies, this is not a lie because you will see it in the Nigerian movies. You have the Igwe. Okay, I've watched a considerable amount. I'm just going to admit it. But it's good because I'm getting a historical analysis. And these are Nigerian movies. You'll have the Igwe. He's the king. And you have his court, his council. They usually wear the red hat with the feather. Those are the elders. This is who he's speaking about, that you have to not only give gifts to the king, but to the elders as well. So these Europeans are paying homage to be able to enter into sail on their land. It says every ship on its arrival is expected to send a present to these gentlemen of a small quantity of bread and beef, and likewise to treat them as often as they come on board. Did you hear that? They were going on board the ship. When they do this, their approach to the ship is announced by the blowing through of a hollow elephant's tooth, which produces a sound resembling that of a post horn. After the kings have been on board and have received the usual presents, permission is granted by them for trafficking with any of the black traders. When the royal guests return from ships, they are saluted by guns. I'm just saying, this is just really interesting stuff. From the time of the arrival, I'm sorry, I skipped a little bit here. From the time of the arrival of the ships to their departure, which is usually near 3 months, so they've been sitting in port sometimes until they get their cargo filled. It says, which is usually near 3 months, scarce a day passes without some Negroes being purchased and carried on board, sometimes in small and sometimes in large numbers. The whole number taken on board depends in a great measure on circumstances. In a voyage I once made, our stock of merchandise was exalted in the purchase of 380 Negroes, which was expected to have procured 500. The number of English and French ships then at Bonny had so far raised the price of Negroes, because now the demand is more than the supply, so we're going to have inflation, as to occasion this difference. The reverse, and a happy reverse, I think I may call it, and this is in brackets, was known during the late war. When I was left at Bonny, I frequently made inquiries on this head of one of the black traders whose intelligence I believe I can depend on. He informed me that only one ship had been there for 3 years during that period, and that was the Moseley Hill Captain Ewing from Liverpool, who made an extraordinary purchase as he found Negroes remarkably cheap from the dullness of trade. So they had a war, internal fighting, you know what I'm saying? So then now you have more supply than trade. So they're bragging that they got to steal with cheap Negroes. Okay. And he's dropping names. Upon further inquiring of many of my black acquaintance, what was the consequence of their decay of their trade, he shrugged his shoulders and answered, only making us traders poorer. So when he asked, yo, what's up? Why is this thing? Why, you know what I mean? Why things is falling down? What's going on? He says, the black trader says, the African says, only making us traders poorer and obliging us to work for our maintenance. One of these black merchants being informed that a particular set of people called Quakers were for abolishing the trade, he said, So when they heard about abolition, this has to be in the 1700s by this time, he said it was a very bad thing, as they should then be reduced to the same fate they were in during the war, when through poverty they were obliged to dig the ground and plant yams. So if I'm to understand, I'm doing a little commentary today because this stuff is interesting, but if I'm to understand, he's saying that the time that it was dwindling because it was so lucrative, those Africans who are participating in this case in Bonnie, they weren't too glad about the fact that you don't need any more of my slaves or my people. I was once upon the coast of Angola also, when there had not been a slave ship at the river Ambris for 5 years previous to our arrival, although a place to which many usually resort every year. And the failure of the trade for that period, as far as we could learn, had not any other effect than to restore peace and confidence among the natives, which upon the arrival of any ships is immediately destroyed by the inducement then held forth in the purchase of slaves. And during the suspension of trade at Bonnie, as above mentioned, none of the dreadful proceedings which are so confidently asserted to the natural confidence of it were known. The reduction of the price of Negroes and the poverty of black traders appeared to have been the only bad effects of the discontinuance of the trade. The good ones were most probably the restoration of peace and confidence among the natives and suspension of kidnapping. And he's going to go in a little bit more into this kidnapping. Again, this is just one of the sources, but I think this source is just so telling because it's telling another side of this whole conversation. When the ships have disposed of all their merchandise in the purchase of Negroes and have laid in their stock of water, wood, yams, they prepare for sailing by getting up the yards and topmats, reeving and running rigging, bending the sails, and by taking down the temporary house, they then drop the river to wait for a favorable opportunity to pass over the bar, which is formed by a number of sandbanks lying across the mouth of the river. With navigation channels between them, it is not uncommon for ships to get upon the bar, and sometimes they are lost. The first place the slave ships touch at in their passage to the West Indies is either the island of St. Thomas or Prince's Island, where they are usually carried the sick on shore for the benefit of the air, and likewise replenish their stock of water. The former of these islands is nearly circular, being 120 miles across, and lies exactly under the equator, about 45 leagues from the African continent. So they make their first pit stop right off the coast of Africa, some small little islands, to try to because right now people are sick. They need to re-up on certain things, so they're stopping. It abounds with wood and water and produces Indian corn, rice, fruits, sugar, and some cinnamon. The air is rather prejudicial to a European constitution. Nevertheless, it is well peopled by the Portuguese. So again, Europeans can't really deal well in very tropical climates. So they're saying, you know, according to him, it's not really, it's prejudicial, meaning, you know, they don't do well in those kind of environments. Prince's Island, which is much smaller, lies in 1 degree 30 minute north latitude, and likewise produces Indian corn and a variety of fruits and roots besides sugarcane. Black cattle, hogs, and goats are numerous there, but it is, what is this? Infested with mischievous and dangerous species of monkeys. During one of these voyages I was landed upon the island of St. Thomas with near 100 sick Negroes who were placed in an old house taken on purpose for their reception. Little benefit, however, accrued from their going ashore, as several of them died there, and the remainder continued nearly in the same situation as they were landed. Though our continuance was prolonged for about 12 days, and the island is deemed upon the whole healthy, Upon the arrival of slave ships in the West Indies, a day is soon fixed for the sale of their cargoes, and this is done by different modes, and often by one of them called, listen up now, this is interesting, a scramble, of which some account will be given when the sale of the Negro is treated up. So remember that term, scramble. Very interesting. The whole of their cargoes being disposed of, the ships are immediately made ready to proceed to sea. It is very seldom, however, that they are not detained for want of sufficient number of sailors to navigate the ship, as this trade may justly be dominated by the grave of seamen. Though the crews of the ship upon their leaving England generally amount to between 40 and 50 men, scarcely 3/4 and sometimes not 1/3 of the complement ever return to the port from which they sailed. Through mortality and desertion, the causes of which I shall speak of under another head, under another chapter. The time during which the slave ships are absent from England varies according to the destination of the voyage and the number of ships they happen to meet on the coast. To Bonny or Old and New Calabar, a voyage is usually performed in about 10 months. Those to the windward, let me see here, let me go back up. Those to the windward and Gold Coast are rather more uncertain, but in general from 15 to 18 months. So, you know, a year and a half, they on the sea making this trip. Okay, so that is the end of the first chapter. I'm going to read one more because that one, I know it sounds like a lot. It's not reading as a narrative, although he's reading it as an account, but it's very, very interesting. As like he said, and I was noting as I was reading it, that they were getting permission and they were paying taxes. According to his account, they were paying dues to the kings and the Igwe and their court, the kings and their council, and they did not just obtain the slaves by means of raiding without permission to even, and I've always had that question every time I hear this story because I'm like, that don't add up to me. But let me continue. Let me read one more chapter here. It's not a very long book, so probably by the end of the week we'll be done. But it says the manner in which the slaves are procured. After permission has been obtained for breaking trade, that's the term that they say they call it. It's called breaking trade, as it is termed. The captains go ashore from time to time to examine the Negroes that are that are exposed to sale and to make their purchases. The unhappy wretches thus disposed of or bought by the black traders at fairs, which are held for that purpose at the distance of upwards of 200 miles from the seacoast. And these fairs are said to be supplied from an interior part of the country. Many Negroes, upon being questioned relative to the places of their nativity, have asserted that they have traveled during the revolution of several moons, their usual method of calculating time, before they had reached the places where they were purchased by the black traders. At these fairs, which are held at uncertain periods, but generally every 6 weeks, several thousands are frequently exposed to sale who have been collected from all parts of the country for a very considerable distance around. So sometimes they say the sale from West Africa, but the testimony, and not only this one is saying they went not only deep, they went deep in and down and north and scooped out people from far distances and brought them to these fairs, of which now they're going to be sold to traders to be brought to the coast. So it was like exportation, or really it's not just sometimes the way they picture it, just West Africa. As we're reading and we continue to study, that's not true. They're coming from a very far way, or a lot of different tribes or nations within a nation was represented there, contrary to popular belief. I read it again. It says, while I was upon the coast during one of the voyages, I made the black traders brought down in different canoes from 12 to 1,500 Negroes one time, which had been purchased at one fair. They consisted chiefly of men and boys, the women seldom exceeding a third of the whole number. From 40 to 200 Negroes are generally purchased at a time by black traders. And that word, as I'm reading it, I'm like, yeah, traders are right. From 40 to 200 Negroes are generally purchased at a time by black traders, according to the opulence of the buyer, and consist of those of all ages from 1 month to 50 years and upwards. Scarce any age or situation is deemed an exception, the price being proportionable. Women sometimes form a part of them who happen to be so far advanced in their pregnancy. And we find this interesting because this is the same thing that they're going to do on the other side of the water. When you get to the West Coast, it's the same thing. They sold you when you were pregnant. They sold you when you was on the breast. It's the same thing that's happening in Africa at this time to get you to the slave trade done by Africans. The Europeans are going to turn around and do the same thing again. It says, scarce any age or situation is deemed an exception, the price being proportionable. Women sometimes form a part of them who happen to be so far advanced in their pregnancy as to be delivered during their journey from the fairs to the coast. And I have frequently seen instances of deliveries on board ship. The slaves purchased at these fairs are only for the supply of the markets at Bonny and Old and New Calabar. There is great reason to believe that most of the Negroes shipped off from the coast of Africa are kidnapped. This is his words. But the extreme care taken by the black traders to prevent the European from gaining any intelligence on their modes of proceeding, the great distance inland from whence the Negroes are brought, and our ignorance of their language, with which very frequently the black traders themselves are equally unacquainted because it's different tribes, prevent our obtaining such information on this head as we could wish. I have, however, by means of occasional inquiries made through interpreters, procured from intelligence relative to the point, and such as I think put the matter beyond a doubt. From these, I shall select the following striking instances. So he kept, they're kind of nosy and things. So he wants to know, man, dude, where you getting all these people? Although you really didn't want to know because you was taking them anyway. But for curiosity's sake, according to him, he wants to know where they're getting all of these people. So he begins to ask people. He says, while I was employed on board of one of the slave ships, a Negro informed me that being one evening invited to drink with some of the black traders, upon him going away, they attempted to seize him. As he was very active, he evaded their design and got out of their hands. He was, however, prevented from effecting his escape by a large dog, which laid hold of him and compelled him to submit. Sounds familiar. These creatures are kept by many of the traders for that purpose, and being trained to the inhumane sport, they appear to be much pleased with it. I was likewise told by a Negro woman that as she was on her return home one evening from some neighbors to whom she had been making a visit by invitation, she was kidnapped, and notwithstanding she was big with child, sold for a slave. This transaction happened a considerable way up the country, and she had passed through the hands of several purchasers before she reached the ship. A man and his son, according to their own information, were seized by professed kidnappers while they were planting yams and sold for slaves. This likewise happened in the interior parts of the country, and after passing through several hands, they were purchased for the ship to which I belonged. So he's saying he has a inkling that this is how they were obtaining them. It frequently happens that those who kidnap others are themselves in their turns seized and sold. You can see that in the movie, The Book of Negroes. The Book of Negroes, you see that in the case of Mina, 12-pound Mina, when she's kidnapped, the little young boy she ends up marrying him. He helped the kidnappers to kidnap her. And then when she got on the ship, he was in chains. So you can see that illustration in that movie, which is about a true story, The Book of Negroes. But let me continue. Wait a minute. Okay, a Negro in the West Indies informed me that after having been employed in kidnapping others, he had experienced this reverse, and he assured me that it was a common incident among his countrymen. Continual enmity and thus fostered among the Negroes of Africa, and all social intercourse between them destroyed. So now you distrust one another. Yes, still happening. Which most assuredly would not be the case had they not these opportunities of finding a ready sale for each other. During my stay on the coast of Africa, I was an eyewitness of the following transaction. A black trader invited a Negro who resided a little way up the country. One moment, please. One moment, please. 1 second. Thank you all for just joining us. We are in the Lev Project. I have 1 second and I'll be right back. Okay, not on the line anymore. That was an important call, but let me continue. It says, during my stay on the coast of Africa, I was an eyewitness of following transaction. A black trader invited a Negro who resided a little way up the country to come and see him. After the entertainment was over and the trader proposed to his guest to treat him with a sight of one of the ships lying in the river, the unsuspicious countryman readily consented and accompanied the trader into a canoe to the side of the ship, which he viewed with pleasure and astonishment, like, oh, chill, wow, that's nice, you know. So they were well aware what was going on. So he's like, yo, come, let me show you, because they're two quote unquote black men. He said, while he was thus employed, some black traders on board who appeared to be in the secret leaped into the canoe, seized the unfortunate man, and dragged him into the ship immediately, sold him. But dude, this European is saying Alexander Falconbridge said he was a witness to this, but you still bought him after you witnessed that they kidnapped him. So you kind of do know where they were getting them from. But again, I sidebar. Let me continue. Previous to my being in this employ, I entertained a belief, as many others had done, that the kings and principal men bred Negroes for sale as we do cattle. During the different times I was in the country, I took no little pains to satisfy myself in this particular, but notwithstanding I made my inquiries, I was not able to obtain the least intelligence of this being the case, which it is more than probable I should have done, and such a practice prevailed. All the information I could, so he's trying to say, oh, he think they was breeding, just like how they bred on this side. He's trying to say they thought they was breeding cells. No, they were stealing cells. Okay, which it is more than probable I should have done, and such a practice prevailed. All the information I could procure confirms me in the belief that to kidnapping and to crimes, and many of these fabricated as a pretext, the slave trade owes its chief support, and still to this day. The following instance, tends to prove that the last mentioned artifice is often made use of. Several black traders, one of whom was a person of consequence, exercised an authority somewhat familiar to that of magistrates, being in want of some particular kind of merchandise and not having a slave to barter for it, they accused a fisherman at the river Ambris, A-M-B-R-I-S, with extortion in the sale of his fish. And as they were interested in the decision, they immediately adjudged the poor fellow guilty and condemned him to be sold. He was accordingly purchased by the ships to which I belonged and brought on board. as an additional proof that kidnapping is not only the general, but almost the sole mode by which slaves are procured. The black traders, in purchasing them, choose those which are roughest and most hardy, alleging that the smooth Negroes have been gentlemen. By this observation, we may conclude they mean that nothing but fraud or force could have reduced these smooth-skinned Negroes to a state of slavery. It may not be here unworthy of remark, in order to prove that the wars among the Africans do not furnish the number of slaves they are supposed to do, that I never saw any Negroes with recent wounds, because he's the surgeon now. So he's trying to say the story is everybody's going to war and that's how they're getting the people. He's saying no, in his estimation, they're still in the people because he hasn't really seen any wounds, which must have been the consequence, at least with some of them, had they been taken in battle. And it being the particular province of the surgeon to examine the slaves when they are purchased, such a circumstance could not have escaped my observation. As a further corroboration, it might be remarked that on the Gold and Windward Coast, where fairs are not held, for those who have just joined us, thank you for joining us. He gave his definition of what the fairs were earlier. If you missed it, once we're done, you can go back. It says the number of slaves procured at a time are usually very small. So if they're not getting them from these fairs, it's not going to be as much as when they go to these meeting grounds and purchase all of these slaves. It says the preparations made at Bonny by the black traders upon setting out for the fairs, which are held on the country, are very considerable. From 20 to 30 canoes capable of containing 30 or 40 Negroes each are assembled for this purpose, and such goods put on board them as they expect will be wanting for the purpose of the number of slaves they intend to buy. When their loading is completed, they commence their voyage with colors flying and music playing, and in about 10 or 11 days, they generally return to Bonny with full cargoes. As soon as the canoes arrive at the trader's landing place, the purchased Negroes are cleaned, oiled with palm oil, and on the following day, they're exposed for sale to the captains. The black traders do not always purchase their slaves at the same rate. The speed with which the information of the arrival of the ships upon the coast is conveyed to the fairs, considering it is the interest of the traders to keep them ignorant, is really surprising. In a very short time after any ship arrives upon the coast, especially if several make their appearance together, in different countries showing up, those who dispose of the Negroes at the fairs are frequently known to increase the price of them. These fairs are not the only means, though they are the chief, by which black traders on the coast are supplied with Negroes. Small parties of them from 5 to 10 are frequently brought to the houses of the traders by those who make a practice of kidnapping and who are constantly employed in procuring a supply, while purchasers are to be found. For those who've just joined us, if you're wondering why I'm stumbling over the words, I said it earlier, this is written in Old English. I have the link in the box. And so a lot of the S's look like F's, and sometimes I get tripped up. And this is also why I'm reading very slowly. It says, and we're almost finished the second chapter here. When the Negroes who the black traders have to dispose of are shown to the European purchasers, they first examine them relative to their age. They then minutely inspect their persons and inquire into the state of their health. If they are afflicted with any infirmity, or are deformed, or have bad eyes or teeth, if they are lame or weak in the joints, or distorted in the back, or of a slender make, or are narrow in the chest, in short, if they have been or are afflicted in any manner, to render them incapable of much labor, if any of the foregoing defects are discovered in them, they are rejected. But if approved of, they are generally taken on board the ship the same evening. The purchaser has liberty to return on the following morning. This is their return policy. I mean, this thing was like, I'm sorry, they had a return policy, okay? The purchaser has liberty to return on the following morning, but not afterwards, such as upon re-examination are found acceptable. So you got 24 hours. The traders frequently beat those Negroes who are objected to by the captains and use them with great severity. So what? You got rejected? You're not good enough to be a slave? I'm going to tell you behind up. It matters not whether they are refused on account of age, illness, deformity, or for any other reason. At New Calabar in particular, the traders have frequently been known to put them to death. So after you stole them, and now they're not, you know, the European doesn't want to buy them, you do them in. Instances have happened at that place that the traders, when any of their Negroes had been objected to, have dropped their canoes under the stern of the vessel and instantly beheaded them in the sight of the captain. Upon the windward coast, another mode of procuring slaves is pursued, which is by what they term boating. He's dropping a lot of terms. So for researchers out there, I'm a researcher. So when I hear keywords, you hear me say it the way I do, you definitely want to do your homework. He's giving his testimony, but he's giving some terms that like breaking trade, bolting, scramble, that we definitely could look up more about. So those researchers out there, take note. A mode that is very pernicious and destructive to the crews of the ships. The sailors who are employed upon this trade go in boats upon the rivers seeking for Negroes among the villages situated on the banks of them. But this message is very slow. This message is very slow. I just missed my place. Hold on. Oh, but this message is very slow and not always effectual. For after being absent from the ships during a fortnight or 3 weeks, they sometimes return with only from 8 to 12 Negroes. Numbers of these are procured in consequence of alleged crimes, which are before observed wherever any ships are upon the coast, are more productive than at any other period. Kidnapping, however, prevails here. So they try different methods, but he keeps coming back to kidnapping. And just a side note, this is the same thing they did after slavery. They convicted you of a crime and they put you on the chain gang so that they could keep you back enslaved. So the same methods, nothing changed. I have good reason to believe that 120 Negroes, which were purchased from the ship to which I then belonged, then lying at the river Ambris, by far the greater part, and not the whole, were kidnapped. This, with various other instances, confirms me in the belief that kidnapping is the fund with suppliers, the thousands of Negroes annually sold off these extensive windward and other coasts where boats prevailed. And so the next chapter that we shall continue tomorrow is going to be very interesting, as we just learned how they procured and how they actually broke trade in beginning to acquire these slaves. Very, very interesting. Most I will tomorrow, we will read the treatment of the slaves once they were procured. So once again, this is Emuna Yisrael, Solonomics 101. I want to thank you for joining us. This was an early edition. This is the Left Project. Right now, we're currently reading an account of the slave trade on the coast of Africa by one Alexander Falconbridge. So until next time, if you want to, go back over, if I was studying a little bit, or if you want to research some of the stuff, just definitely click that link and you'll be able to read it. It's free. It's on Google Docs and you can definitely check it out. So until next time, oh, wait a minute. Let me make sure I didn't miss anybody if you had anything to say while I was reading here. Very, very interesting stuff. And sorry for all my commentaries, but man, oh man, oh man. That's all I have to say is man, oh man, oh man. Okay, I don't see any comments. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and call it an evening. Now, afternoon. Everybody have a blessed day. See you tomorrow.